Welcome to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Gazette Hawkeyes reporter John Steffi. I'm excited to welcome back to the podcast Tom Kakert of Hawkeye Report, this time on the On3 Sports Network. Tom, thanks for joining me.
It's always good to be on with you.
So it's a big day on Saturday. We finally get a chance, aside from the 30 minutes while most of the media was in Dallas or Final Four, finally get a chance to actually see some spring football this weekend.
Yeah, it's always weird when you have like long runs for teams in the tournament or things like that are going on other things that might be going on, maybe a coaching search or something, and you end up with football kind of slides off to the side a little bit. And it's kind of done that this year. It's been a strange spring, but I'm excited to get a look at the football team because we only got that one little window that was like 25, 30 minutes. And that's certainly not enough to whet the appetite that Iowa fans have to know about this football team.
Oh, yeah, there's only so much you can learn in 25 minutes there. And we haven't really had a chance to talk to coaches yet either this spring. So that also
Yeah.
kind of limits how much we're hearing. We're just hearing from players who, of course, are being careful to not reveal too much and get themselves into trouble. So you look at it that way, this is really going to be the big learning opportunity for everyone, us included.
Yeah, it is. And, this spring it's been we did get into practice. There were a lot of walking wounded. I think some of those guys are back on the field, and especially along the offensive line. And it sounds like the line's coming along. And if the line can come along and improve, that whole offense improves. And I've heard a lot of really good things about the new quarterback, Cade McNamara, and what he's able to do on the field as well.
I think really if you were to rank my number 1, 2, and 3 things I'm going to be looking at on Saturday, 1, 2, and 3 are probably all the offensive line. Just because if you get these guys to take that next jump who were kind of thrown into the fire last year, it could be a really good group, but you haven't seen reason to say it's really good yet based on results that weren't so great last year.
Yeah, it is. It's a different group. It's just because they've got a lot to prove. Just because they did struggle last year. They had a tough time protecting the quarterback. They had a tough time run blocking. And when you're averaging under 100 yards a game rushing, that's not good. And so they've got to amp things up. Talking to Logan Jones, he seems very positive. He acknowledged that he was late on some of his snaps and getting the ball back there, and we could see that last year. And it was just a young guy made the transition over to center. He's inexperienced at that position, and he just was trying to assess making line calls and where guys were supposed to be and getting the snap back on time and everything. And I think he basically admitted it overwhelmed him at times. So now he's I think a little more comfortable. He told me James Ferentz helped him out this winter when he was back home. So I think they've gotten better. They've improved. Another guy to watch, I think, is Jennings Dunker, who might be your right tackle this weekend. They're really, really high on his potential. He's one of those guys that's kind of what I would call like country strong guy. That's just, Kirk, when you remember when Kirk talked about him last year, it was just he had been hurt that redshirt year. So playing last year was, just throwing him off the diving board into the deep end and see if he can swim. And he had some ups and downs, but I think him, Bo Stevens, you've got Colby at left guard, Mason Richmond. When we got our look into practice, he was still not out there, and I assume he's out there now, coming back from a little knee issue. And then they've got Rusty Feth coming in. Heard he visited, came in for watch some practice and stuff. He's still finishing up his work, but heard that they're really impressed with kind of his knowledge, and he'll come in knowing the expectations because he's played for George Barnett before, so he kind of knows what it's like and what the expectations are for from Coach Barnett. So I look, I'm going to be skeptical. You got to see it happen, but I it's just my nature to kind of be a little more positive about things. So I kind of think this group's going to turn the corner a little bit.
And most importantly, with Jennings Dunker, the 2022 Solon Beef Days hay bale toss champion. Most importantly, more than anything else there,
Yes.
and he's like the protein shake guy, the guy who has like more protein than I thought was like physically, humanly safe to have even. So
Yeah, I think some of his teammates are skeptical of that thing that he's doing with the protein shakes, or that's actually happening. I think Jennings might be pulling our leg a little bit.
that would make a little bit of sense there based on some of those numbers. Like, okay, how much or how quickly does 4 become 6? But anyways, I think that'll be interesting as well. You mentioned quarterback. Having Cade McNamara able to do stuff in spring is, I think, an encouraging sign, because it's easy to forget that he's just coming off that, I think, his knee surgery not that long ago, back in the fall. So just the fact that he's been able to do stuff this spring, I think, is certainly a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I do too. I think the things that I've heard out of camp are really, really positive about Cade. And that's in talking to some of the guys and just talking to some people who've been at practice. Just the vibe from him is really good. That he's the unquestioned kind of leader of the offense. He's endeared himself to both guys on both sides of the ball. When you hear from players like Logan Lee and Cooper DeJean about how much they think of Cade so far, I think that speaks well of him. It really does. That he's a really good leader, positive leader, and that he's gained the respect of those guys quickly. And I'm anxious to see him out there throwing the ball around. And I'm not sure if you were there when Eric All was talking about him, who knows him well from Michigan, his
Yes.
Michigan days, and talking about how they had their race to be in, who would be in first at 4 a.m. And Cade would get pissed when Eric would beat him there. So it was then Eric just kind of gave up because Cade was always going to try and be there before him, and he's getting in the building at 4 a.m. to start working on stuff. So that's Cade's competitive spirit, and he's going to do whatever it takes to win. And I know he's really excited about this opportunity and the chance to potentially lead Iowa to some special things this year.
And I think a lot of what really stands out with his leadership from what we've been hearing is these little things.
Yeah.
Like Deontay Vines talking about how Cade has been really insistent on them all clapping to break huddles and kind of having that at the same time. And you actually look like a team, that kind of thing. I think a lot of those little small things that are easy to overlook, those things can really add up. And I think that's why he's been able to, be such a respected leader. Let's see, 4.5 months, if I'm doing my math right, after he committed, almost exactly 4.5 months.
Yeah, and he is he's just one, just having spent a little bit of time around him, he's just one of those guys that they gravitate towards. And let's be honest, this offense needed somebody to believe in it. Because I don't think they believed in themselves by the end of last year very much. I mean, they were scuffling, and I think he's given them kind of a refresh, a restart, a reboot, whatever you want to call it, and his belief in this group, and that goes to the skill position guys, the offensive line. He believes in those guys, so I think he's going to be a really effective leader for the Iowa offense.
I think probably the other big question mark on the offensive side of the ball is new wide receiver.
Sure.
Obviously, having the injuries that they've had, just the attrition that they've had, I think that's going to be a big question mark. Of course, the biggest question is something that's not going to get answered Saturday, which is, okay, can they get some help in the second portal window there? But I'll be interested to see a couple things. How much has Deontay Vines progressed? Really,
Yep.
last year was his first chance really in the spotlight.
Yep.
So I think that's going to be interesting. And do you see some progressions from some of these preferred walk-ons that have come in and who've had more opportunities than walk-ons would typically have just because of how thin the room has been?
Yeah, and it got really thin very quickly, even this spring when Brody Breck steps away, which wasn't a surprise. Let's be honest, he was borrowed time as a wide receiver because of what he was doing on the baseball diamond, and no one's going to blame a kid that's throwing over 100 miles an hour for pursuing that dream, because that's the proverbial $1 million arm at Banks Field, and he's pitching great. But it did hurt that Seth Anderson's been out, a little bit, and Jacob Bostic was in the boot, and he's not able to do things. So those were two guys I think I was looking forward to seeing out on the field this spring, and seeing if they could, maybe pop a little bit. But it's been an opportunity. I know one of the names that got bounced around was Reese Osgood. Um, he's a young guy from Wisconsin that has come along, and I know that they've said some good things about him. Caden Witchen, who's from Williamsburg, went to Iowa Western. That's another guy that a little bit of buzz. We'll see what the Austin Kutcher, not Kucher, but Kutcher, the kid from Ohio State, who's a graduate transfer walk on. You've got some guys there. Alec Wick got his feet wet a little bit last year, and kind of faded out of the rotation. But early in the year, he was playing a good amount. Kid from Regina, so. But they've got to hit the portal. Just got to hit the portal and try and land a wide receiver this spring. Some guy who's kind of done something, can come in kind of ready-made. It doesn't have to be a star. Don't expect it to be a star, but somebody who can bounce in there and kind of get in there right away and help. Somebody's got to take the opportunity. There's just these guys receivers want to catch the ball. I'll tell you what else will help Iowa too is having Eric All, because that's plug and play Sam Laporta level player. I mean, he's a legit like second day NFL draft prospect as a healthy player, and he's got great chemistry with Cade McNamara, and that shouldn't be understated. And Luke Lachey, the way he came on late last year, that's a pretty really good combo. And then you've got Ostrenga coming along. You got Steven Stilianos who's coming along. So the tight end room combined with what they've got at wide receiver, I think can be pretty effective.
The one thing I'll bring up about Austin Kutcher, I did hear good things from, I think it was Deontay Vines about him,
Yep.
but as I was writing at some point about him, like at some point I am like destined to accidentally say Ashton.
Yeah.
Like it's just like in my brain so much where like
I
I
know.
started to type Ashton and it's like, wait, nope, Austin. So apologies to Austin if I end up saying Ashton by accident in a tweet. But you bring up a great point with the tight end room, especially with Eric Hall. And I've been impressed too with how well, we talked about Cade, how well he really is blended in with this team. I think you can say the same thing about Eric Hall, who,
Yeah.
why hasn't he gotten an IHOP NIL deal yet is beyond me. But
Yeah.
somebody that's, blended in with the community really well. When we got him and Luke Lachey, they looked like they've been friends for like years.
Yeah.
Granted, they did know that cameras were there, but still, like that chemistry really looked authentic and looked like they had known each other for more than a few months.
Which
So,
is, what's really funny about that is that Eric All coming from Michigan and Luke Lachey's family is all Ohio State. And you
oh
would think there
yes.
would be like some animosity there just from their histories, but there's not. It's,
Oh no.
they're both really cool guys and good guys to be around. And Eric All's story, if anybody saw the stories on him when he was at Michigan about being rescued as a child and everything. I mean, just incredible story about that young man that maybe Iowa fans don't know yet, but certainly will get to know before the season starts.
Yeah, he's really a hard guy not to like, where I
Oh,
think he could become
just
that
a
kind of
joy.
next fan favorite.
He's just kind of he's loose like Sam Laporta was loose. Just fun
Maybe
to be
even
around.
more loose.
Yeah, I think more loose and I think Sam got frustrated sometimes last year with the struggles of the offense and us asking him about the struggles of the offense. But right now, when Sam was happy Sam was pretty loose.
Oh yeah. So I guess it's a tight end tradition
Yes,
almost.
yeah, we got to have a little
So
tight end tradition. So it's gonna be fun.
yeah.
This team's got Cade's pretty honest, and he's pretty straightforward. Really like him, and yeah, I like the group. I think one of the other interesting things that we're gonna try and figure out is who's the backup quarterback.
Yeah. I think Joe Labus really is going to
Yeah,
be the incumbent, but if Deacon Hill starts to do things, you just never know.
yeah, you don't know how close that race is going to be, but I know it's going to be a race, and um, does Spencer Petras end up back? I don't think that's going to happen, but I don't think that's in the plans. I think that they're happy enough with the step that Joe Labus has taken and what they've seen from Deacon Hill. Kirk's. I don't know how many times Kirk has made the comment. He's bigger than I thought, and it's not in the tall way. I haven't had a quarterback that big. I think he's a little shaped a little bit more like me, a little bigger guy, you know,
Yeah.
nothing
You
wrong with,
know,
hey, Jared Lorenzen was, or the Pillsbury throw boy or whatever back in the day, you know, you could get
well, it's
an
like
NIL deal.
you get the two extremes there because you have Joe, who's kind of the quick, mobile quarterback, not
Yeah.
super big, but can move. Granted, you didn't get a chance to see it a ton in the Music City Bowl, but he has the ability if, the plays are drawn up that way.
My guess is, Deacon was up at Wisconsin. He may have been visiting Culver's a lot and having some butter burgers and some cheese curds every day or something.
Well, that is a man after my own heart. As
I
somebody
knew that would
who
I knew that would warm your cockles there a little bit, you
Oh
know.
yes. As somebody that I'm surprised that the Iowa City Culvers does not know me on a first name basis yet. You know, if we get Deacon at some media availability, I'm sure me and him will be able to bond over our love of
Cheese
cheese
curds,
curds.
the love of cheese curds.
Yes.
Yes, the
So
great
and
American delicacy.
Yes, everything at
Wisconsin.
Culver's, the great
Yes.
American delicacy.
Yes.
But
Absolutely.
as much as I would love to talk about cheese curds and
And
Culver's,
Culver's.
and by the way, Culver's, if any franchisees are listening to this, feel free to sponsor this podcast. So, as much as I'd love to talk about that all podcast long, defensively,
Yep.
probably should talk about that side of the ball. So, defensive line, there's been some injuries there. Noah Shannon, most notably, as he's coming back after having a procedure. So
And
he's
Logan
in,
Lee.
and
And
Logan
Logan,
Lee.
both shoulders.
Yeah, a tough time for shoulders. And Noah had been out since, let's see, going back, or I think he had the injury in the Iowa State game, had been playing through it,
Yep.
which really tells you about his pain tolerance there. So,
Logan was the same way. Logan was the same way. It was like almost all season where he was his shoulder was bad. So both of them got their shoulders fixed, but they don't need to practice really.
no.
The guy that concerned me seeing who wasn't practicing was Y.A. Black, who seems to be habitually hurt in the spring or fall camp. And that's a guy that just unlimited potential, I think. He's got kind of the Carl Davis starter kit where he's a bigger D tackle that just has a ton of ability. And I think he could play in the NFL, but he's just got to be healthy and get the film out there and get the reps and, get his pad level down a little bit. That's the big thing that KB always tells him to do. And, if he can get those things put together, I mean, sky's the limit for that dude. Really, sky's the limit.
The few fractions that we have really gotten to see him consistently when he's been healthy, it's been impressive.
Yeah.
Even looking back when he was young, he was making plays where it's like, oh, okay, that's a name to watch there. And, this would have been a great opportunity with Noah and with Logan being out for
Yep.
him to really just step in and get all those first team reps. So it'll be interesting. This will probably be one of the more interesting positions to watch just because it's been so deep that we're going to get a chance to see some of these other guys that we haven't seen much in games.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that foursome with Shannon, Lee, Black, and Graves is as good as it's going to be in the Big Ten, in my opinion. I mean, those are four players that, yeah, there's a lot of years where Wyatt Black and Aaron Graves are really solid starters. Graves is going to take a giant leap this year. And imagine if this group still had Lucas Van Ness. I mean, jeez, Louise. I mean, as it is, I thought getting Joe Evans back was huge for this group. It's a proven guy, 6.5 sacks, 7 sacks. You can just kind of pencil that in for him. He's learned to become a 3-down guy and be real effective. When he first started, I'll never forget that spring. They were just that spring where I think it was his redshirt freshman year, and they were just struggling. They didn't have a lot of DNs, and they were just trying to find somebody that might have a little wiggle off the edge. It was doing kind of their Raider package, and they were trying to just find somebody that they do that, and it just walk on from Ames High School that just ends up showing them a little bit, and then he kind of carves out that role, and then he just keeps bulking up and figuring out how to play 3 downs. And I'd always ask Phil, do you think he could be a 3-down guy? Oh yeah. And sure enough, now he's a 3-down guy. They've just got. I look for Ethan Herkett to really take a jump. Max Llewellyn is a guy to watch, and obviously Deontay Craig, dynamite player who's going to. I think he's got a chance to get double-figure sacks this year, just based on what he did last year in a limited role. I mean,
Yeah.
that guy's coming like a freight train right now.
And you look at it, and it's hard to explain how Deontay Craig was not an all Big Ten honoree last year with the
Yeah.
year that he had. And he did it with fewer snaps than other players because you had experienced guys like Joe Evans. You had what we assume will be a first round pick with Lucas Van Ness. I don't want to guarantee anything with the NFL draft, considering how things can change quickly there. But for most likely will and absolutely should be a first round pick with Lucas Van Ness. So he didn't get a ton of snaps compared to what he might have gotten in other years. And he produced, was it 6.5 sacks, something like that. I don't have that number right in front of me, but
Yeah.
really good numbers despite not that many snaps. So he's another guy where, okay, now you give him the opportunities really, and he could take maybe even another jump really ahead.
Oh yeah, that's why I think he's double figure sack guy. I think, and we're gonna probably be having to ask him questions at the end of the year about what his future looks like. Just because I think he's he's ascending at a rapid rate. Herkett a little bit longer time after that knee issue. So I think we're going to see more from him. He's kind of in the John Wagner mold where not super explosive, but he's just going to be there and he's going to fight you every step of the way. I know they're really high on Max Llewellyn and what he can do. I think that's the guy that this year everybody will be like, boy, Max Llewellyn, huh? Look at that guy. I think that's his year this year. I know they still like Chris Reams is a kid who's always kind of been in there. He's a senior, good length. Maybe he gets into that mix. D tackle is just hard to find more snaps with because I mean you look at like Ontario Thompson. I've heard really good things about him coming in as a JUCO from Iowa Western, and Jeremiah Pittman's still there, and he got some run, and I thought played pretty well. But those guys are probably like third team D tackles right now.
And it gives you a luxury because you're going to be able to rotate in so many guys that come week 12,
Yep.
you're going to have a lot more, fresh bodies there. So that
Yep.
helps a lot. But
Yep.
you kind of have to figure out, like, okay, how are these guys all going to get snaps? I don't envy the defensive staff there. And it's a very good problem to have. I'm sure there's
Great problem
nobody
to have.
inside the football facility complaining about this. But, there are a lot of different guys who probably would be starters at other Big Ten programs who are going to be second team or maybe even third team this year on the defensive line.
Yeah, and then you look at like linebacker. You've got that bunch of guys that are like in that sophomore group with Jaden Harrell and Carson Shire and Zach Tweet, guys like that. You've got Jay Higgins obviously is going to start this year. I assume Nick Jackson from Virginia is going to come in and be the other starter there, but how much cash are you going to play? I think maybe more because Wisconsin is not going to be Wisconsin of old. They're
No,
not going to be. They're not going to be heavy fuel crew kind of guys. They're going to be more diverse on offense, and that's going to be a wild change because that was one of the three linebacker teams that you would see Iowa go up against it, and now that's gone. It might be Minnesota, it might be like, and maybe some Illinois, where you'd see more, but you're probably going to see a lot more of Sebastian Castro at the cash. But I know they're really high on like Kyler Fisher, Shire. They're really high on. So, but you're going to play Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson. You don't bring Nick Jackson in as a grad transfer like that with the production that he had, all ACC player, and think that he's going to sit. He's going to come in and be a automatic Cade McNamara level leader on that defense, but he just doesn't have as much time because he's got to graduate. So he's not on campus until June, but I suspect he's going to, by August, everybody's going to be looking at Nick Jackson as well.
Yeah, he has like the impossible job of replacing Jack Campbell. But
Yeah.
you look at it, if you have to replace Jack Campbell, that's about as good as you can ask for in terms of production there. So I think it helps if, you're mentioning kind of that sophomore group. If you have one guy at least that steps up in that group, I think that would give them a lot of really good depth. I'm
Yep.
curious, like, I think Carson Schrar could be that person.
Yep.
Um, I'm interested, especially in seeing him. You were mentioning Kyler Fisher. Nice for him to kind of finally get that
Mhm.
opportunity. So, he's somebody that's been around, who's done a lot on special teams. So the linebacking core is kind of the question mark that you have a lot of reasons for optimism for, but you just don't know what exactly it's going to look like.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think it'll be interesting, especially with Jackson not being there on Saturday yet. Well, at least not able to practice yet. I
Yeah.
think that could be a really interesting thing in terms of seeing who could be maybe in that next tier.
Yeah. I think it's a really deep group. I think there's a lot of talent there. I just think we haven't seen it. I mean, and even the two deeps, Kelby Tellender was what's listed in there. Jackson Rexroth listed in there with that cash position. Two interesting guys. I mean, uh, but if Kelby Tellender gets in there, I mean, that's a story for the ages. A former kids captain ends up playing at the University of Iowa. I mean, that's Tom Rinaldi coming in with the sad music behind it. Tears rolling down your eyes talking about that story. I mean, that's just we'll see if he can. I hope he makes it. That'd be a great story.
Oh, yeah. That was the first thing that I noticed on the spring two deeps was when I saw him on there. I was like, okay, this is me like a great feature story if he really does end up contributing here. Like,
Oh yeah.
I'll write it. Everyone's gonna write that one.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's a really cool thing to watch too. And then in the secondary, it's young.
Mhm.
But young with reasons for optimism, I'd say. You have Jamari Harris coming back from an injury. He's been out for a year. That's always kind of a question mark in terms of how he comes back. But then
Mhm.
the other three most likely starters, Cooper DeJean, had as good of a year as you could physically ask for, and then
Do
some.
everything. Does
Yeah.
everything.
Oh, yeah. Like, and he's been doing this at cornerback, which hasn't even,
Wasn't
everyone
his
was
natural
expecting.
position. No.
Yeah, everyone was expecting him to be a safety, and then he turns out to be one of the best cornerbacks in the Big Ten, if not the best.
Yeah. I think Cooper is one of those guys you could ask him to do just about anything, and I bet you he's good at it. He just he's just one of those people. I mean, you look at his basketball highlights in high school. I mean, he's just granted small school stuff, but still just dominant on track. He would dominate in just about everything. One of the interesting things talking to him is the relationship he's developed with Cade McNamara. They've become like just fast friends, and I think Cade's kind of focused on being around. He sees Cooper, and I wouldn't be surprised if come August, September, there's a small little package for Cooper DeJean on the offensive side of the football. So just keep that in your back pocket. I think there's going to be something. I don't know what it'll be, but and it's not going to be like he's going to be playing 20 snaps, but there might be 5 snaps a game where you see number 3 out there and playing a little offense, doing some things. So keep that in your back pocket. But getting Jamari back, I think, really helps because they needed somebody to just solidify that other side of the field. Um, I really like what I saw from Xavier Wampa in the bowl game. They're super high on Cohen Intringer,
Yeah.
who's another safety prospect in that class. He's going to help them. And Quinn Schulte, I thought was terrific last year. I mean, I thought maybe they'd take a little bit of a step back after Jack Kerner moves on, but Schulte's really good at that. He does exactly what Phil Parker wants from that position. And I think the younger guys like TJ Hall and Deshaun Lee. Those guys are going to be coming along, add some depth. I know they were really high on TJ Hall. I know he got roasted in the Nebraska game,
He knows
but
too.
he knows too. He knows he got cooked on that play, but that's okay. He's going to bounce back from that. And yeah, they've got some talent back there in that secondary. So I think arrow pointing up for that group right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if they get in the market for maybe a corner in the portal this during this next period too, where they try and add a little bit more depth there.
Yeah, I think that would help because you have right now a lot of reliance on some of these young players like the TJ Hulls and the Deshaun Lees to really take that next step up. And if you do have kind of one more guy who's had some experience, that helps because injuries are going to happen. And you
Yep.
don't want a situation like last year's Nebraska game. And of course, I think TJ Hull is be much more prepared for a circumstance like that in 2023 than in 2022. But still, you'd like to have a little more insurance there. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, that was just bad. You know, Cooper gets knocked out cold, and then he's got to leave the game, and you got to throw TJ out there, and then eventually throw Jameson Hines out there, and they, to Nebraska's credit, they picked on him, and
Yeah.
it was effective. I mean, you give credit where credit is due, and they did that. I should also mention Devin Hilson has moved over there, and I really anxious to see. Um, him rise up a little bit playing safety. I think he's got some talent as well.
And two, with him, you look at the running back room, and I'm sure this was the same writing on the wall that I'm seeing now is what he saw last year, was when you have Caleb Johnson, who we didn't
Yeah,
really talk about the running backs because
we didn't talk about those guys.
that's kind of the position that like, okay, nobody's really that concerned about. Like, you know what you're gonna get with Caleb Johnson. It's just a matter of do you get the blocking. But when you have Caleb Johnson, when you have LaShawn Williams, when you have Jazzian Patterson, who showed flashes in the bowl
Yep,
game, you got some
yep.
good depth there. So maybe the opportunity will be there at safety more so than it would have been at running back. So that'll be interesting. I'm sure it's a lot of learning this spring with that move over, but if he can learn fast, you know, maybe he works his way up onto the two deeps. We'll see.
And one of the things we'll have to see is I was told I think it's out there that Eli Miller tore his ACL, so he was their fullback. So who is somebody transitioning over to fullback? One of those linebackers where it's a little crowded, they're gonna slide over there, because I don't see them abandoning the fullback. Do they go to more of an H back with like Eric All or Lachey or Estrenga as like a kind of a hybrid thing? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Those are maybe questions we could pose to the offensive coordinator, among other questions that we'll ask him on Thursday.
There might be a few things there,
There's a lot of things to ask one Brian Ferentz this week. This will be the first time we've talked to him since the contract.
Yeah. 25 points per game to drive to 325.
Drive to
So
325.
like,
Yeah,
yeah. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see, I don't think we're going to see wholesale schematic changes.
no,
So I wouldn't expect to hear him all of a sudden say, okay, this is going to become a spread offense. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. But there are things that he can do to get this offense, to put them in a better position. And we'll see what he's working on among many other questions, I'm sure.
yeah, it's going to be a fascinating press conference on Thursday, and I'm genuinely interested in seeing what we see from the offense in general.
Oh yeah.
Just in general on the field and seeing Cade out there and how much he does. I assume he's going to be full go. I know he has said that he was going to be pretty much full go, but again, for people going, it sounds like it's going to be more of a practice than it is a scrimmage, and there's a big difference between those two things. So I think that might be by design too, that they're just not wanting to expose Cade a whole lot and trying to control things as much as they can control things.
Yeah, it's not going to be what you're seeing on TV with some of these other programs that have the, various scoring methods for the offense or the defense or the blue team and the white team. Yeah, no, that's not going to be. I would be awfully surprised if that's what we ended up seeing all of a sudden on Saturday. So, and special teams too, would be remiss to not mention that. Drew Stevens added a lot of weight. I think that's going to be interesting. His range could get really deep now that he's bulked up more.
Well, one thing Drew Stevens doesn't lack, confidence. I wish I was as confident in my life as Drew Stevens is. He's a confident kid, and that takes you a long way at that position. I mean, he believes he can make 55, 60-yard kicks when needed, and maybe he'll get those opportunities this year to do that. But he added about 20 pounds, 15, 20
he's
pounds.
like probably in the 15-ish. He was saying from 180 to 185 area back in the season in the fall to now 197 as of last week when we talked to him. So probably a good 15 pounds in there. So
yeah, he's strong. Torrey Taylor back. We know what he can do. They're going to keep Cooper DeJean at punt returner, and had he had enough returns, he would have led the country in punt returns at 16 and a half. So he's really good. So and I think they'll probably maybe keep Caleb Johnson at kickoff return. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
A question for LeVar on Thursday.
Yeah, I think he's in the mix. So we'll have to narrow that down. I know he was looking at some people, so we'll see what he brings up here.
Yeah, certainly an interesting time for Iowa football.
It is super interesting. Excited to talk to the coordinators, and super excited. Although I wish the weather was going to be a little bit warmer on Saturday, but it's always good to be back in Kinnick and seeing some football.
Yes. Well, Tom, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, John. Thank you. And we'll talk soon.
Yes. And thanks to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. Until next week, we will talk Hawks later.